37-year-old mother of two, Tiffany Dunford, was relaxing on a couch outside her home in Max Meadows, Virginia, when 28-year-old family friend Savannah Adams pulled up to the property in her car. In a horrifying act of violence, Adams doused Dunford with gasoline, set her on fire, then fled the scene. With county detectives arrived to find Adams suffering from severe burns to most of her body. She died from her injuries, and law enforcement launched a search for Adams, who was arrested the following day. Adams is being held without bail at the New River Valley Regional Jail on a first-degree murder charge. She has a lengthy rap sheet which include previous convictions for assault, trespassing, and obstructing justice, and she was out on bond for attacking someone with a pipe at the time of Dunford's murder. The accused killer was also facing a misdemeanor destruction of property charge. While Adams's motive for killing Dunford remains unclear, some of the victim's relatives had recently accused Adams of hacking a family member's Facebook account. Number 14. Ramon Rivera. On November 18, 2024, a mentally ill homeless man with a lengthy rap sheet murdered 3 people on the streets of Manhattan. Armed with 2 knives, 51-year-old Ramon Rivera fatally stabbed 36-year-old construction worker Hangel Latalandi at 8:20 in the morning. 2 hours later, he murdered a 68-year-old man who was fishing along the East River. Rivera then went to 42nd Street and 1st Avenue, where he killed 36-year-old Wilma Augustin outside the United Nations building. All 3 victims died from their injuries, and Rivera was apprehended shortly after the 3rd stabbing. He faces 3 counts of first-degree murder and is being held without bail at Rikers Island. The accused killer has at least 8 prior arrests in New York City alone, including 5 burglary arrests since late 2023. Just a month before the stabbings, he had been released from jail despite his obvious tendency to reoffend. When asked why Rivera was free to continue committing crimes, New York City Mayor Eric Adams blamed a systemic failure and untreated mental illness. Number 13. Sincere Hayes. An arrest has finally been made in the murder of 22-year-old exotic dancer Mercedes Vega, whose charred remains were found in the backseat of a burning car outside Tonopah, Arizona in April 2023. She had been beaten, shot, and set on fire by her killer, who had also poured bleach down her throat. Vega died from burns and smoke inhalation, the latter of which indicates that she was still alive when the car was set ablaze. Detectives believe Vega was forced into a vehicle and abducted prior to her murder, but her killer flew under the radar until November of 2024, when the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office announced the arrest of 22-year-old Sincere Patrick Hayes of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Hayes is facing a first-degree murder charge and will eventually be extradited to Arizona to face justice. While authorities have released few details about the circumstances leading up to Vega's death, a law enforcement spokesperson said that they do not believe Vega and Hayes knew each other. Police also revealed that they plan to make more arrests in connection with the case. Number 12. Kerry Dale Grayson. A man who murdered a hitchhiker in 1994 has become Alabama's 3rd death row prisoner to be executed by the state's controversial nitrogen gas method. 49-year-old Kerry Dale Grayson was 19 years old when he and 3 friends picked up 37-year-old Vicky DeBlow and drove her to a wooded area where they beat and stabbed her to death. DeBlow was traveling to her mother's house when the group offered her a ride. Sensing that something was off during the drive, she tried to escape but was tortured and murdered. Grayson was led into the death chamber at around 6 p.m. on November 21, 2024, after having a last meal of tacos, beef burritos, chips, and guacamole, and Mountain Dew. While strapped to a gurney, he gave a hostile and profanity-laden final statement, prompting the warden to take the microphone away and proceed with the execution. After the gas began to flow, the convicted murderer shook and twitched for several minutes before taking several final gasping breaths. 21 minutes after the execution began, Grayson was pronounced dead. Number 11. Sararat Rangziwathaporn. Nicknamed Miss Cyanide, 36-year-old Sararat Rangziwathaporn has been sentenced to death after being convicted in the first of 14 murder trials she's facing in Thailand. According to prosecutors, she swindled wealthy individuals out of thousands of dollars to fund her gambling addiction and then poisoned her victims to death with cyanide. In November 2024, a court found Rangziwathaporn guilty of murdering her friend, 32-year-old Siraporn Kanwong, who died during a girls' trip to Ratchaburi province in April 2023. Rangzi Wathaporn made no efforts to save Kan Wong, who collapsed after eating dinner. Refusing to believe that Kan Wong died from natural causes, her family pushed for further investigation. An autopsy revealed traces of cyanide in her system, leading detectives to suspect that Rangzi Wathaporn was responsible for her death. Investigators connected the accused serial killer to over a dozen similar homicides, and she's currently facing more than 80 criminal charges. She pleaded not guilty but has shown a disturbing lack of remorse for her actions and was even seen smiling when the death penalty was announced. Number 10. The murder of Harshita Brella. When 24-year-old Harshita Brella failed to answer the door of her Ilford, East London home for a welfare check in mid-November of 2024, law enforcement launched a missing persons investigation. Detectives traced her last known whereabouts to the town's Boating Lake, where a security camera captured footage of her walking with her husband, 23-year-old Pankaj Lamba. One day into the search for Brella, police found her murdered body in the trunk of a car roughly 100 miles from her home. She had been strangled to death, and investigators instantly became suspicious of Lamba due to the couple's history of domestic violence. 3 months before the homicide, Brella had filed a criminal complaint against Lamba. She was placed in protective housing while police investigated, and Lamba was arrested for his alleged mistreatment toward his wife. Brella also obtained a protective order banning Lamba from harassing and intimidating her. The order expired in October, and Lamba is now the prime suspect in his wife's murder. Police are continuing to investigate, and a coroner's inquest is scheduled for May of 2025. Number 9. Gary Worthy. 57-year-old career criminal Gary Worthy was attempting to rob a bodega in Queens, New York at gunpoint in November 2024 when he was confronted by NYPD officers. He shot at the cops, prompting them to return fire in self-defense, and Worthy was fatally wounded in the exchange of bullets. Worthy was on lifetime parole after serving prison time for manslaughter and gun charges, but this didn't stop him from continuing to commit crimes. In August, he was accused of pulling a knife on his brother and friend in 2 separate incidents and threatening to kill them both. The habitual offender also hadn't shown up for his required meetings with his parole officer in 4 months. For these reasons, the prosecution urged the judge to hold Worthy on $120,000 bail, but the court allowed him to walk without bail despite his growing list of ongoing criminal cases, which included several assault and burglary charges. The week before Worthy's death, he was arrested for drug possession and resisting arrest, presenting the court with yet another missed opportunity to keep a dangerous criminal behind bars. Number 8. Lamora Williams. A Georgia mother who murdered her 2 children in one of the most gruesome ways imaginable has been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In October 2017, 24-year-old Lamora Williams forced her sons into her kitchen oven and cooked them alive at the family's Atlanta home. She then called the boys' father, Jameel Penn, with footage of their deceased sons. Distraught and devastated by the footage, Penn frantically called 911. Williams also called 911 and said she had arrived home from work to find her kids dead, despite claiming she had no involvement in the boys' deaths. She acted suspiciously, worried that she was going to be arrested. And that's exactly what happened after investigators tied her to the horrific double homicide. Williams maintained her innocence when the case went to trial in November 2024, but was found guilty of 14 charges, including felony murder, cruelty to children, and giving false statements. She was sentenced to life without parole plus 35 years. Number 7. Kirk Edward Hazlitt III. Shortly before 9 p.m. on November 15, 2024, 64-year-old Kirk Edward Hazlitt II was shot dead at his hunting cabin in Hinckley, Minnesota. His own son, 31-year-old Kirk Edward Hazlitt III, stands accused of killing him in what appeared to be a planned and deliberate execution. Just moments prior to the shooting, a nearby trail cam alerted the victim's brother to someone approaching the property with a pistol. Hazlitt II's brother attempted to grab his gun but didn't get to it before Hazlitt III barged into the cabin and shot his father 3 times. After taking the 2 surviving victims' phones, Hazlitt III allowed them to leave the property. He fired several more shots into his father's body to ensure the victim was dead, then fled the scene. Pine County deputies arrested Hazlitt III at his home in Cambridge on charges of second-degree murder, burglary, and kidnapping. Family members told investigators that the suspect and victim didn't get along and hadn't been on good terms for a long time, but the circumstances surrounding the strained father-son relationship have yet to be revealed. Number 6. Joseph Ambrose. An elderly man has been arrested in connection with the 55-year-old cold case murder of 17-year-old Mary Kay Heese, bringing long-awaited answers to a mystery that went unsolved for more than a half-century. Heese was stabbed to death in Wahoo, Nebraska, on March 25, 1969. Her body was found dumped in a ditch hours later. She had vanished earlier that day during the 6-block walk home from a local cafe. Footprints near the scene indicated that Heese had tried escaping her killer, but that he had caught up with her. In September 2023, investigators exhumed Heese's body and a new autopsy was performed. Authorities have not revealed the newly discovered evidence, but it was enough for them to finally make an arrest. On November 18th, U.S. Marshals apprehended 77-year-old Joseph A. Ambrose at his home in Ponca City, Oklahoma. The senior citizen faces a first-degree murder charge and is currently being held in Kay County while awaiting extradition to Nebraska. Number 5. Daniel Roche. While performing a welfare check at the Las Vegas home of 68-year-old Monique Gilbertson, in early November, police were met by her roommate, 37-year-old Daniel Roche, who claimed to have no knowledge of the senior citizen's whereabouts. When officers showed an interest in searching a freezer at the home, Roche became visibly nervous. Inside the freezer, the police found Gilbertson's body. Roche claimed that he had found her dead in a dining room chair and had placed her in the freezer because he didn't know what else to do. He speculated that Gilbertson had overdosed on cocaine or fentanyl, but she wasn't known to use drugs. Gilbertson had invited Roche to live with her after meeting him at a local store. They initially got along, but Gilbertson quickly became upset about Roche's unhygienic lifestyle habits. She kicked him out and changed her locks in October and fell out of touch with her family and friends at the same time. Roche was arrested on suspicion of second-degree murder and is currently being held without bail at the Clark County Detention Center. Number 4. Alberto Morris. In a shocking act of animal cruelty, a Brooklyn man hurled his friend's Pitbull from a 14th-floor balcony during a heated dispute. The dog's owner, 27-year-old Luis Gabriel Santamaria, arrived home on November 1st to find his canine companion Kith dead on the sidewalk outside his building. Kith was reportedly killed by 33-year-old Alberto Morris, who Santamaria had befriended just weeks earlier. Morris had recently immigrated to the US and the men bonded over their shared Panamanian heritage, but their friendship took a sour turn when Morris supposedly became overbearing and obsessive. According to Santamaria, Morris began sending unusual texts, showing up at his apartment unannounced and ringing his doorbell incessantly. On the night Kith was killed, Morris had gotten drunk and aggressive at a Halloween party. He kept trying to fight Santamaria, and security threw him out. After realizing Morris had a copy of his apartment key, Santamaria rushed home, worried about what Morris might do to his property. By the time he arrived home, it was too late to save his dog. Morris was charged with aggravated cruelty to animals and is on supervised release as he awaits his next court hearing. Number 3. The murder of Isla Bell. A weeks-long search for a missing Australian woman has ended with the heartbreaking discovery of her murdered body. 19-year-old Isla Bell vanished after visiting the St Kilda, Victoria apartment of 53-year-old Marat Ganiev in early October. A few days later, the two could be seen fighting violently through the windows. Bell's phone was turned off the next day and she was never seen or heard from again. On November 19th, police found Bell's remains at a waste facility. They made the discovery after conducting extensive surveillance on Ganiev and his friend, 57-year-old Ayal Yaif, who were both arrested in connection with Bell's death. Ganiev admitted to moving the young woman's remains but denied killing her. He was charged with murder, while Yaif is facing 1 count of assisting a murder offender. The judge remanded Ganiev into custody without bail, while Yaif is awaiting the court's decision on his request for bail to be granted. Number 2. Christopher Darnell Jones Jr. A former college student has pleaded guilty to killing 3 of his classmates, sparing the surviving victims from a painful trial and avoiding the possibility of an aggravated murder conviction. In November 2022, 22-year-old University of Virginia student Christopher Darnell Jones Jr. opened fire on his peers aboard a charter bus after an outing to Washington, D.C. Football players Lavelle Davis Jr., Deshaun Perry, and Devin Chandler were killed, while 2 other students were injured. Jones had no known connections to the victims, but he seemed to target them specifically. Several people had noticed that he was behaving strangely prior to the shooting. He made ominous statements to a mentor via text message and warned his family that something bad might happen. In November 2024, Jones pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of aggravated malicious wounding, and 5 counts of use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. He faces 20 years to life on each murder count and will be sentenced in February of 2025. Number 1. The murder of Peter Sponza. Australian single dad Peter Sponza had just won full custody of his 4 children when he was mowed down during his lunch break at a Perth construction site in November 2024. He had relocated to Western Australia to start his life over, and he was looking forward to the future, unaware that it was about to be ripped out from beneath him. Seemingly out of nowhere, an erratic driver accelerated towards Sponser and his work crew. His co-workers were able to get out of the way, but Sponser was struck by the man's car and died from his injuries at a nearby hospital. Just moments before murdering the victim, the 29-year-old suspect had rammed his car into another vehicle and slashed someone's tires with a machete. He had also approached several of Sponser's co-workers who were sitting on a bench and repeatedly asked them where his dad was. The suspect has been charged with murder, aggravated assault, occasioning bodily harm, reckless driving, criminal damage or destruction of property, and being armed in a way that may cause fear.